Good evening, folks, and welcome to the live stream. I'm trying out a new format, so hopefully this will go down well with you guys. We're going to cover three topics tonight. Starmer meeting with Meloni in Italy, Ofcom not investigating, well, what was the story again? Not investigating Yvette Cooper, and of course the Lib Dems. That was off to a good start, wasn't it? And the Lib Dems versus Nimbysism. So we'll get into those stories tonight. I just want to cover three stories. I don't want to go into too much detail with those. I'd like to spend more time with you guys on in chat, so responding to some of your comments in chat. I think that'll make the stream a bit more interesting. So, well, I want to start off with this first story. So it says here, Starmer looks to Italy on how to stop migrant boats. Sir Keir Starmer has suggested that he will study Italy's asylum processing deal with Albania as part of a pragmatic approach to tackling migrant boats crossing the English Channel. Speaking to reporters, the Prime Minister said he had discussed the concept of Italy's deal during talks in Rome with the Italian counterpart Giorgia Meloni. Meloni said Sir Keir had shown great interest in the planned scheme, under which some migrants rescued in Italian waters will be sent to the Balkan country to have their asylum claims processed. Sir Keir has said that he was interested in Italy's model of paying North African countries to do more to stop boat crossings. Now, of course, this has not gone down very well. Oh, Brad, thank you so much for that super chat. Anyone know if Putin has a page? So I just want to refer to what Brad is talking about here. Of course, in the news in Lebanon, a number of Hezbollah militants, I believe, and civilians have been injured, and I believe some are in a critical condition because a number of pagers, something that I didn't know was still being used, but a number of pagers had small amounts of explosive device installed in them a few months ago, and then they were 8 killed max. Okay, so it's the last time I read it, they were just injured. It didn't say about any deaths. So it seems someone, I think we all know who, someone secretly put small amounts of explosive into these devices, and then flooded the Lebanese market with them, or smuggled them into the country in some way and distributed them. And they were mainly used by militants of Hezbollah, and of course civilians, like for example doctors or people who are in areas where there isn't a signal, a mobile phone signal. So, you know, once again, I was shocked to know that there were actually people still using pagers, but yeah, it's a pretty shocking development, and I think we all know who's probably behind it. Do we know if maybe we can send Putin a pager? I'm not saying what type of pager, but I'm sure if he has one, he's probably gotten rid of it at this stage. 8 dead, over 2,500 injured. My goodness. I have 2 pagers at work. I can't provide further information though. Israel loves new lows, not that the genocidal state can reach much lower. Look, I think everyone's pointing the finger at Israel over this. You know, who else would be interested in attacking Hezbollah in this way? But it's an unusual way to carry out an attack. So I want to return to this story for a moment, because I think this is something that's very interesting. So Keir Starmer had criticised the Conservatives, he had criticised the right wing, criticised the far right, of course, in Britain over the last number of months, before the election and after the election, and during the rioting, of course. And he criticised the far right in particular for being part of the far right groups for egging on individuals to engage in rioting. And now he's sitting down with a far right prime minister to discuss a far-right policy of moving people from Britain to another country to be processed. Now, let's sort out some misconceptions about all of this. This is not like the Rwanda scheme. The Rwanda scheme was about sending people to Rwanda. They would have their claims processed, and then if they were successful, they would stay in Rwanda. If they were unsuccessful, they would stay in Rwanda. So, or maybe they would go back to their home country, but the problem was Rwanda's. So what Italy is doing instead is a two-pronged approach. Now, I don't agree with this policy. I think Italy needs migrants, and many asylum seekers don't want to stay in Italy. They want to move on to other countries in Europe. They have to pass through Italy in many cases to get to Britain, or to get to France, or to get to Germany, or to get to Belgium, or wherever. But what Italy's doing is it's picking people up. It's taking some of them, not all of them, but it's taking some of them to Albania. They're processed by Italian officials, and then if they're successful in their claim, they are relocated to Italy, where they continue on to the next stage, which is refugee status. And then eventually they can rebuild their lives in Italy. If they're unsuccessful, they can put in a claim. If they're unsuccessful after that, they will be returned to their home country, or they would probably stay in Albania. Now, Albania is receiving a lot of money for this. I don't actually have the figure in front of me, but they're receiving a lot of money for this. But the other prong of the approach is, of course, to give huge amounts of money to Libya and Tunisia. Now, the situation in Libya is absolutely dire. There are people living in camps with very few facilities available for them. The camps are in a desperate state, and it's like a prison there, and human rights abuses are being carried out on a daily basis, and Italy is facing a lot of criticism over this for giving money to Libya. Libya is basically a failed state, so there isn't really a government to deal with there. 4 million to Italy to support their immigration plans. Yes, so it seems what Keir Starmer and Labour are doing is giving some money to Italy to help them give money to Libya, or to take more asylum seekers out of the system, in a sense, to move more people to Albania, or to send more people back to Libya. Is this going to work? Well, it may stop a few people. It may send back a small number. But as I keep saying, and others keep saying, these people don't want to stay in Italy. They don't want to stay in France. They don't want to stay in Europe. A lot of them, not even a lot, a minority of them want to get to Britain. And what is the point in continually saying, well, we're going to force people to go back to France, or we want to do a deal with France where people are not allowed to leave France? The best solution, of course, is a safe route. If you create a safe route, then people don't need to rely on people smugglers. You don't need to rely on boat crossings. They don't need to fill up these boats, unsafe boats, to cross the English Channel. There's a safe route for them to arrive in Britain. Now, it will be more humane to have a processing centre, for example, in Calais, where people can put in a claim there, where you would have British officials in Calais carrying out the processing. But there are a number of problems with that. Who is responsible for that camp? Is it the British government, or is it the French? Because the French may not be willing to allow the British officials to do everything there. And what happens, because it's a European country, it's a member of the EU, France has to follow EU rules. So it's not like in Albania. Albania is not a member of the EU. So in a sense, what Italy is doing is it's offshoring people out of the EU, where the protections, human rights protections, are a little bit lower, and they don't have to follow EU rules. While in France, if you're to process claims in France, well, it would be very different to Albania. Now, I don't know if Labour are going to go down this road of trying to process people in Albania. They may try something like that, but it would be just for optics. It's not going to make any real difference. Maybe the French should have Rwandan people process the claims in Calais just to close the circle. Well, I said Yoni, great to see you on the stream tonight, Yoni. Working with the far right, though, not comfortable with that idea. No, and look, the other side of the argument, the people on the other side of the argument say, look, Meloni is the leader of a European country. It's on the front line when it comes to the immigration crisis. So it makes sense to work with her. You don't have to agree with her politics, but you have to work with her. And I understand that. But trying to copy, an inhumane policy should not be what the Labour government should be doing. This is not what we expect from a Labour government. We expect something more humane, not sending people off to some other place to be processed and then, in a sense, left there. Because in some cases, people will be left there. You don't have full control over the processing centre. If there are human rights abuses taking place, who is responsible? Would it be the British government? Would it be the Albanian government, or whoever? And what are the legal implications for both governments there? So, like I believe the Albanian one isn't up and running yet. It's still in the negotiation phase. But it's a case of, did I miss a buffer? No, please tell me there were no buffering tonight. What's in the Labour manifesto? This is not in the Labour manifesto, of course. Sure, it's great to see you on the stream tonight. Hope you're well. It would appear, Chris, that compassion is seen as very left-wing these days, and it's so wrong. Yeah, it shouldn't be left-wing. Everyone should be compassionate. It shouldn't become a political issue, compassion. So I disagree completely. I disagree completely with going with this approach, the Italian approach, because it's not humane. It has been criticized by the likes of Amnesty International and others. So it would not be something that would sit well with Labour MPs, I would imagine. Now, as we keep going back to this point, what do you do? Well, I think the normal logical solution would be to create safe routes for people to come in. People want to get to Britain. You keep pushing them back, they're going to keep returning. So create a safe route where you avoid the people smugglers and you avoid a situation where people end up dying in the sea. Are we not all human? Well said, Chris. Maybe may as well process asylum claims in the Channel Islands. So I don't understand what's the problem with processing claims in Britain. If you actually process the claims in Britain, you can move people. It's much cheaper. Because imagine if you have to process claims abroad. Okay, those people have to be accommodated. So you have to pay for the accommodation. It's not just the processing that you're paying for. It's also the accommodation and the resources. And it's more expensive to process somebody in another country. You have to provide accommodation, food, security, lawyers, all of these things. Well, if it's in your own country, it's a bit cheaper, I believe. And there is an idea that, you can move people into council property. Now, this is very controversial, about moving asylum seekers into council houses, because there's a shortage of council houses. But where else would you put them? So if people are successful in their claims, this is a different story, but this is later on in the process. But if people are successful in their claims, they need to be provided housing. And if you don't provide them housing, they end up on the street. And if they end up on the street, there's a risk that they'll end up involved in crime. And then where do they go? They go to prison. And it's much more expensive to put somebody in prison than to put somebody in a council house. Safe route is the only way ahead, Max. Yes, well said, Mark. It's the only way. And I think what will happen eventually is, after all this tap dancing around about let's stop the boats and let's crush the gangs and let's help the French, or let's encourage the French, or let's do this, that and the other. Eventually, I think politicians will have to come to the conclusion that actually none of these things are working. Maybe we should create a safe route. And also it takes away this toxic policy, a toxic topic, a toxic issue from the likes of the Conservatives or Reform UK, because they want to maintain they want to keep immigration front and center. They want people to be angry about immigration. If you create a safe route, the number of boat crossings will disappear. If you're able to have people processed quickly, some deported if they don't have a right to be in the country, and the others who can stay can rebuild their lives, be productive members of society. They can work in the NHS, they can work in the care sector, they can apply the skills that they have, they can be contributing to society. I think this takes the sting out of the tail of immigration that has been used, of course, weaponized by the Tories and Farage for a number of years now. Could this help reform? That's an interesting question. What's interesting is that the German government, the left-wing German government, has imposed controls on the border, and the right-wing are really happy about that. So I think if Keir Starmer does some sort of deal with Italy, he's talking about £4 million. I think Reform UK would probably criticise it because they say, well, it's not going far enough, it's not doing enough. But if it's seen by the average person on the street as something positive, oh look, Labour are actually dealing with immigration, then it will harm Reform UK, because Reform UK want people to be angry. But if Starmer is doing something, this is not really doing something. This is about pretending to do something. It's about the optics. It's not actually about dealing with the issue. It's pretending to deal with the issue. It's about showing people that you're dealing with the issue. Painting reform into a corner. Yeah, it is in a sense, because you're taking away their bargaining chip with the public. Their tool to convince the public to vote for them. So if you take this away from them, of course, nobody's going to... What's the point in voting for Reform UK? So I think the Tories tried to do this, but I think they were split between, we better not resolve immigration, because if we do, then we'll have nothing to use against the Labour Party. So I still think safe routes is the way to go. It would stop the boat crossings pretty much overnight. You would see much fewer crossings. And this is what's galvanising so much support behind Reform UK. Farage would stop going to the beach to point the finger at boats coming in, because there'd be so few boats coming in. And you would see there would be a number you could point to. Oh, look, the number of crossings has declined under a Labour government. I think that's something they could use to their advantage. But instead, it seems Starmer wants to go the tough route. Unless he's going to do it in tandem, but there's no mention of safe routes at the moment. Unless safe routes are just too toxic. Something that Reform UK and Farage and the Tories would consider as weakness. Oh, look, what you're doing is you're creating a safe route. All these people can come in through this safe route, but they're not coming in through the safe. They're coming over anyway. But a safe route would reduce the number of people crossing the channel in this way. There would be fewer deaths in the channel. And this is, once again, and I keep coming back to this point, is that the right wing don't care about people dying at sea. They will say that they do. They will pretend that they care about people drowning in the channel. But in reality, they are against the idea of immigrants coming in. They're against the idea of asylum seekers claiming asylum in Britain. They pretend to care about people dying in the sea, but they don't honestly support policies that would actually stop that. Because if you listen to Farage, you listen to Lee Anderson and Reform UK, they will continually say, the problem is we're not tough enough. The problem is we're not pushing these boats back. What about Ukrainians? There are safe ways for them. Yes, those have more or less been closed off, but and the number of refugees from Ukraine has reduced dramatically over the last year. But yes, there was a safe route. That's why you did not see Ukrainians crossing the channel in rubber boats, because they didn't have to. There was a safe route for them to come in. The same for people from Hong Kong. The patient UK is dying. Yes, it is. And there was an interesting, I'm going a little bit off topic for a moment. There was an interesting story this weekend that was sort of buried. It wasn't really reported in outside Northern Ireland. It wasn't reported in Great Britain very much. So there was a park called Casement Park, which was expected to receive funding from the British government. It's a football stadium. a Gaelic football stadium. And there was the idea that it could be used for the Euro 2028, I think it is. It could be hosting events where, you know, it would be a celebration for both communities, for Northern Ireland. Massive investment, would probably create a significant number of jobs. And the British government have cut the funding. They've decided, well, actually, we can't justify this, or we can't afford it. Now, the Irish government may step in and help out with the funding, but it shows once again that Westminster doesn't give a crap about Northern Ireland. And I don't know if you guys saw the video, but there was a unionist MLA, member of the local assembly in Northern Ireland, who blamed Labour. He criticised Labour, but he didn't criticise the British government, which was very interesting, because the DUP will never criticise the British government. They'll criticise, you know, they may slip and go, sorry, we didn't mean to criticise the British government, we meant to criticise the Conservatives or Labour. But they'll very seldom criticise the British government, because it's like they're in love with the British government. I don't mean to be so glib or so you know, I don't know how to say, but it's quite pathetic, because they won't actually come out and say the British government is wrong here. They will say, no, the Labour Party is wrong. Although, who's in charge? Who is the Labour Party at the moment? They're the government. Don't worry, folks, you're not racist, just society is. I hear they're building a huge processing centre and camp in Scotland. Is that true? Fisher-Price will be paid off and withdraw their sponsorship for frog ash in small boats stopped. Yes, if the small boats are stopped. Yeah, Fisher-Price probably had a deal with Farage to continually provide him binoculars, but that's probably coming to an end. Well, hopefully that will come to an end. He won't be able to weaponize that issue anymore. Okay, guys, let's move on to our next story. This is something that I mentioned a little bit. We talked a little bit about on the show last night. I hope you were able to see Turn Left. A wonderful website, wonderful podcast, wonderful YouTube channel. Do check it out. I was able to speak to Curtis about this. And we had Curtis on the Sunday Roast some months back, and it was great to speak with him. But he brought up this story about Yvette Cooper and her husband Ed Balls, and we had a bit of a chat about that. So it says, Ofcom will not investigate after Yvette Cooper interviewed by husband Ed Balls on ITV's Good Morning Britain. Ofcom received upwards of 8,000 complaints in August after Mr. Balls, a former Labour cabinet minister and regular presenter on Good Morning Britain, questioned his wife, the current Home Secretary, about riots gripping the UK. So, look, this is somewhat related to what's happened at GB News. So in GB News, of course, and Ofcom didn't really investigate that either. It was a different situation, of course. Really enjoyed the stream last night. That's great. Thanks so much for that comment, Roisin. So what happened with GB News was you had the likes of Jacob Rees-Mogg interviewing Lee Anderson, or Lee Anderson interviewing Jacob Rees-Mogg, or Jacob Rees-Mogg interviewing another Tory MP or a Tory minister. And while he was a Tory MP, he had his own show on GB News where he was interviewing people from his party, or people from members of his party in the House of Commons, which of course is a breach of the Ofcom rules, but Ofcom didn't punish GB News over it. There were also other incidents where Jacob Rees-Mogg was looking at the camera and reading stuff, which is actually against the rules, because it's not meant to be a news show. It's meant to be a current affairs program or a talk show. So this, of course, was a problem. Now, on the other side, this was really weird. You had a similar situation where you had a former Labour MP who's now a host of a talk show interviewing his wife, who was the Home Secretary at the time. Now, I said on the show with Curtis, I said, look, I'm surprised they didn't say something like, did you remember to turn off the gas before you left, hubby and love? Or did you put the cat out? Or did you remember to lock the door? Or can you pick up a few things on the way home? It was very weird watching a husband interview his wife, who's now Secretary of State, Home Secretary. This shouldn't be happening. He should have said, look, this is my wife. I'm not going to interfere. This would look really bad. So somebody else can take over. Or I can sit, in the studio, but I won't ask any questions, because there's normally two. There's Ed Balls and I don't remember who the other person is, a co-host. So there's normally two. So he shouldn't have been actually interviewing his wife. It looked really bad. And Ofcom have decided, look, we're not actually going to investigate because, well, we couldn't really be bothered. Like, what's the point of Ofcom at this stage? This isn't so serious. This isn't so bad. It's much worse what's happening on GB News. And it's not just about the politics, it's also how they have been pushing conspiracy theories, pushing anti-climate change conspiracy theory, climate change denial conspiracy theories as well. And this is serious, and they're supposed to be presenting the news. They call themselves GB News. They say that, well, we're actually not a news channel. That was their defense at one stage to Ofcom. We're actually just an entertainment show. We have the name News, but it doesn't really mean anything. It's doing a lot of heavy lifting, but it doesn't actually mean anything. Brian, thank you so much for that super chat. Balls, what are you doing about nepotism concerns? Cooper, well, honey. Well said, Brad. Yes. It was weird. I was watching it and I was like, what the hell? Who thought this would be a good idea? Did they think it was cute? Like, if it was, she came on the show and it was a segment about, I don't know, pets or something like that, or it was a segment about, couples or something like that, then you could sort of let it go. But it was him asking her important questions about the riots, about government policy, about what the Home Secretary and the Home Office was doing about these things. It was completely out of place. But it shows that the media don't care about these things. They only care about driving views to their websites or to their channels. It's just about clicks and views. It's not actually about holding government to account, or it's not about asking challenging questions. I keep asking the question, why don't journalists, when they're interviewing a minister, ask, when they say, well, we're going to spend 100 million here or 100 billion there, always ask the question, is it enough? It's probably the worst question a politician could ever be asked, because they can only answer it in two ways. Either, yes, we're spending enough, then the follow-up question would be, then everything is going to be great. Or the answer is, no, we're not. And then the follow-up question would be, then why not? Why are you not spending enough? So I really wish a journalist would ask, because, look, and it's not a trick question. I think it's a reasonable question, because if you're spending enough, then you would say, look, we're spending enough. We've budgeted, we've understood, okay, this is how much the NHS needs. Let's give the NHS what it needs. Because if you say we're not giving it enough, then how are you expecting it to deal with the problems of today? Can't afford a suit. Who's that? Is it Keir Starmer? Okay, yeah. So I'm going to go off on a few tangents here, but I just respond to some of the points raised by you guys. Can't afford it. How is it possible that Keir Starmer can't afford a suit? Of course he can afford a suit. Okay. I raised this in one of the videos that I uploaded earlier. Do check it out. But it's I think the solution for Keir Starmer could have been give the stuff away. Can you imagine? So he got free sunglasses, or he got free eyeglasses. And he says, look, I don't need these. I can buy them myself. So why not reach out to a family, a poor family who, a child maybe needs glasses, take the child to an optician with, some journalists with you, and then say, here's the money I received, I'm giving it to you so you can get a new pair of glasses. Yeah, maybe it's already covered by the NHS, but you know what I mean. Okay, maybe there's some child who has a particular condition that's not covered. So they could get some free glasses, funded by Keir Starmer or funded by the Labour Party. Now, it may be a little bit cynical, but it would be a great way of dealing with this issue about, Starmer receiving all these freebies. When for example, the football, he gets free tickets to go to an Arsenal game. Give the tickets to a child who would like to go to the Arsenal game. Sit in the executive suite, sit in the corporate box or whatever the ticket is for. If he gets 2 tickets, he could say, look, my wife is going to stay at home. I'm going to bring a member of the public with me, and then film it. And it would be great. And it would be great publicity for Keir Starmer. It would show him as somebody being, reaching out to ordinary people. Instead, it's, I'm going to keep these things and to hell with the consequences. What would Tottenham fans do? I don't know. Oh, Tottenham is, David Lammy is from Tottenham, isn't he? I don't know if he's a Tottenham fan, but he's from Tottenham. Spending enough, not necessarily the answer. Remember track and trace, Michelle Bone, yes. Moan, sorry. So Keir Starmer could pick up a nice suit in Oxfam or Vincent's, yes. St. Vincent de Paul. I think then the Tories and the right wing would criticize him for, wearing sackcloth or something. They would say, oh, he's like Jeremy Corbyn. He's going to dress down to try and appeal to the working class. We're not expecting him to wear rags. He doesn't have to wear the most expensive clothes either. But this thing of freebies, this is the problem. It's not about, if he spends his own money on expensive clothes, that's his business. But if he's getting free stuff, of course somebody wants something in return. We saw it with, what was that Tory MP who was getting money from the betting industry and then lobbying on their behalf, then he had to resign from Parliament, or he was kicked out of Parliament. This is part of the problem. People will give something in order to have some sort of influence. It may not necessarily mean that they're going to get a law, written on their behalf, or they're going to get a tax cut, but it can be just building connections. I want to be close to Keir Starmer. Here's a few, I'm a multimillionaire. It cost me nothing to offer him a few tickets. But this corrupts politicians. This corrupts politics, because it shows that you're more important than the average voter, because the average voter can't do this. Look, I don't know if this is true, but when I used to live in Ireland, the Taoiseach at the time, his name was Bertie Ahern, not a very honest individual. They called him the Teflon Taoiseach at one stage, and he became very famous for brown envelopes stacked with cash. But there was this, I don't know if it was true or not, but they said that you could actually go to the pub where he would go and have a drink every Thursday night or something like that. And you could actually go and have a pint with him, but you could not talk about politics. He would say, look, we can talk about whatever you want, but I'm not going to talk about politics. So people would go there, he'd be in the pub, he'd be having a pint maybe on his own or with somebody, and you could offer to buy him a pint, probably. He should be the one giving the drink, but you could offer to buy him a pint and you could have a chat with him. But I think the rule was, we don't talk shop, no talking about politics here. I think, I don't know if this was true or not. Maybe it's an urban legend. Maybe it's something that was going around. But I think this would be a good thing if there was a politician who would do that. And it shows another side to people. But I don't know if Keir Starmer will go down that road. Politicians can be bought by gifts. Well said, Frederick. Yes, this is part of the problem. It may appear as a gift, but of course many people want something in return. Guys, we're about halfway through the stream, as always, so I want to just take a short comedy moment, and we'll be back with more serious stuff in just a jiffy. So I hope you enjoy this.
Given that China is our major trading partner with our largest imbalance.
If he answers this, mate, I'll give you $100.
How can we better institutionalize trade policy and national security policy to be coordinated?
Oh, man, I'll give you $1,000.
So I had a great relationship with President Xi.
That's not what he asked. He asked about the coordination of national security and trade.
She was my dear, dear friend. He's a tough guy. He's a fierce person.
He didn't ask you what the president of China is like. He asked you about the coordination of national security and trade.
Because we built China.
No, you didn't build China. China built China. What about the coordination of national security and trade?
They would take over $500 billion a year and use it for their military and other things. And we got nothing out of that. We got some cheap product. You can buy 19 pencils instead of 2. Who the hell cares?
That's a good point about the pencils, but what about the coordination of national security and trade?
You can buy 16 dolls for your daughter instead of 2 nice dolls.
Again, good point about the dolls, but what about the coordination of national security and trade?
I believe we will have a very good relationship with China.
And how will you coordinate national security and trade?
We have things today called nuclear weapons. I
believe they've been around for a while, and also this has got nothing to do with the question, but carry on.
I had an uncle who was the longest serving.
No, he wasn't.
I believe the longest serving.
No, he wasn't.
I was told that by MIT.
No, you weren't.
Longest serving professor in the history of MIT.
No, he wasn't. There were others.
I'd say, Uncle John, there's no way. He was telling me about this.
What about the coordination of national security and trade with China?
And I say, Uncle John, you could never. And you know what? He was very modest.
This is no longer a sentence. I mean, you must move on.
He's one of the only people. I mean, nothing's easy in life.
This isn't, for sure. I mean, this is so incoherent. This is like listening to a series of elephant farts being forced through a tuba.
I say, the ocean is going to go down 1/100th of an inch within the next 400 years. That's not our problem. Our problem is nuclear warming.
Hold on. First of all, this was a question about China. Second of all, sea levels are rising, not falling. And it's not going to happen in 400 years, you fucking moron. It's happening right now. And there's no such thing as nuclear warming. Okay? I've never known anyone as stupid and dangerous as you. It's like watching a sea lion fumbling about with a grenade.
This is such an important job. It's a dangerous job, too.
This has gone on for so long and you've said nothing. Move on.
Bad things will happen to the world.
Move on!
Like you've never seen before. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, applause. Why are people... As an adult walked into the room or something?
It's true. Oh my goodness. When I covered this video as well, I was like, why are people clapping? Why are you clapping? We have a super chat from James Wigg. Thank you so much, James. Was Bertie Hearn the poor man's Charlie Haughey? In a sense, yes. Charlie Haughey, he was a trendsetter. When he was the apex of corruption. And then Bertie was just coming along, as he was his apprentice, and there are always two, aren't there? A master and an apprentice. Thanks for that super chat. Lammy can't afford shoes. Oh God, yes. So there were pictures of David Lammy wearing trainers as he was going to meet the U.S. president, which is, look, it's not that important. Bertie, also known as the Anorak Man, was a regular at the Beaumont House. Was once in DNN's on Bagot Street, and Bertie made a point of saying hi to everyone, playing to the crowd. I know who built China. Brides can buy, they do buy. So Starmer is stooping to Farage and Johnson levels. It is, in a sense, looking like that. Conservator, great to see you on the stream tonight. Trump is amplifying Hayton's eating pets. Please his supporters and distract them from the real issues. Yeah, but what are Donald Trump's issues? Like, what is he actually running on apart from make me president? He just wants to be president. He doesn't actually have any issues, any policies. There's nothing that he's actually saying, look, I'm going to improve people's lives in this way. It's just vote for me. I'm going to make America great again. But like, in what way? How are you going to improve people's lives? He was asked there about trade and security, and he started talking about his Uncle Bob or something. Hate Max Revenge, that's what he's running on. Running from jail, not for the presidency, says Chloe. build some more wall. You don't have any policies like he didn't have any policies like last time either. No. But see, the thing is, last time he was presenting himself as someone who's going to shake things up. He was going to ruffle a few feathers. He was going to drain the swamp. He was going to present something different. Yeah, Project 2025, which is something quite scary. He's distanced himself from that. He said, nothing to do with me, because he knows that it's not very popular. Anyway, guys, let's move on to the final story for tonight. Lib Dems housing pits Nimbys against Yimbys. So, in a debate about housing, sorry about the light here, I've been trying to make it dark, but I can't. In the debate about building homes and where to put them, you may have heard the term NIMBY, not in my backyard. You may also be familiar with YIMBY, a word just to describe supporters of new housing, which means yes in my backyard. As a new one is YIFI, which the Liberal Democrat MP Luke Taylor tested out at his party's autumn conference this week. As Liberal Democrats, we need to be better at saying yes if, the MP for Sutton and Chem said, you can say yes to more housing if we get better local public services. Yes to more houses, yes to more homes, we get better transport links. So this is an interesting thing. So the Liberal Democrats have been criticised in the past for being against more public housing, for example. So they have been able to win over Conservative voters who were concerned that the Conservatives would build loads of houses. So it's generally people, maybe middle-aged people or older, maybe pensioners, who were worried about the value of their properties declining because of more houses being built. Because the Conservatives would say, look, we're going to build more houses. We have housing targets. And of course, they had no plans to build any houses, but they had to try and sell an idea of, look, we're going to build because we're in government, we have to do these things. But they wouldn't do them. It was just a false promise, like Boris Johnson's 40 new hospitals. So they had to sell the public something to keep them on board. But they couldn't actually build the houses, because if they built the houses, then of course people in the area would be like, hey, the value of my house has gone down because all these new houses have been built, or these housing blocks of apartments have been built, and it's driving down the price. So I'm going to vote for somebody who's going to stop this. And this was an sort of opportunity for the Liberal Democrats to step in and say, look, we will protect you from the Conservatives. Vote for us and we'll make sure that these developments don't go ahead. So in a sense, the Liberal Democrats were the party of NIMBYs, not in my backyard. But now they realize, look, we can't stick to this because there's a lot of pressure, and the older generation are also moving away from the idea that we need to stop developments, we need to stop building, because yes, there is a sense the value of my house will go down, but my grandchildren can't get on the property ladder. My grandchildren can't afford to pay rent, never mind buy a house. So there are fewer NIMBYs in the population, I think, because they have realized that it's, while maybe when they were in their 50s their children were too young to buy a house, now their grandchildren are old enough to enter the property ladder and into the property market, and they're saying, look, we can't afford anything. It's not like when you were a child, when you were a 20-year-old growing up, you could buy a house for 12 shillings and a packet of strawberries. It's not like that anymore. Half our wages is going in rent. How the hell are we supposed to live on the rest? And how the hell are we supposed to put something aside in order to build up enough for a mortgage? And then even if we did, well, the price of properties have gone up so much that even if we did have the money today, even if we were putting the money away today, by the time we have enough for today, in a number of years, we don't have enough for that property then. David McGuinness, thank you so much for that super chat. Trump is running on delusion. And a lot of his supporters are happy with delusion. They are crazy people. Really, really strange people. Very, very dangerous people. And Trump knows that they will come out and vote for him no matter what he says or does. I've said before, there's almost nothing Trump could do or say that would turn off his voting base. Optimistic Nihilist, thank you so much for that super chat. Great to see you on the stream. Professor Alan Lichtman has predicted Kamala Harris will win with his 13 keys model. I've seen the video about that. I think it was on Times Radio about a week ago. He predicted that Obama, Trump, and Biden win in the past. He did a live stream explaining his analysis and did a Q&A. Yes, he's been somebody who has been right for the last 40 years. And he's been right when the polling was against him. So, for example, in 2016, it was almost expected that Hillary Clinton would win. The polling was very much in her favor. But Alan Lichtman said, no, Donald Trump is going to win because he has these keys, these 13 keys. So some of them are like, for example, the incumbency is an advantage, or, is there a war taking place at the moment, or how popular is the other party? So it's based on losing keys, not so much winning keys. And if you lose something like 6 keys, you're going to lose the election. And Kamala Harris is doing pretty well, and she can afford to lose another 2 keys, I think, out of the total that he has assigned to her, and she'd still win the election. So, look, something could happen. He said, look, it's not set in stone, of course, but something could happen between now and the election that could change that. But if the election were held today, Kamala Harris would win it, and that's a sigh of relief. But I think what she needs to do, she needs to win in a massive way. It needs to be overwhelming, because if it's on a knife edge, Trump and his supporters will of course say that it was rigged against them. They'll claim that, but if there's a massive swing to Kamala Harris, if she wins with a massive majority, the Trump supporters will complain, but it'd be difficult for them to get traction. But if it's on a knife edge, they're going to, the media will run with this. So the media will only run with it if they believe that they can make hay out of it, if they can pump it up as a real story, if they can take advantage of that. But if it's a massive majority, she wins a huge number of states, and the popular vote, of course, then it'll be very difficult for Donald Trump to sell it as, oh, it was stolen. He's already saying, look, if he loses, it was stolen. If he wins, of course, it was not stolen, but if he loses, it was stolen. Stu, great to see you on the stream. Thanks so much for that support. I'm a Kimby, can't in my backyard. It's communal. Thanks. That's a new one. We'll have to add that to the vocabulary. Thanks so much for that. It's going to be rigged regardless. The American hegemony come home. I repeat, Bush versus Gore is the worst possible result. Yes, with the Supreme Court deciding, that was a bad way to go. So when it comes to housing, look, what needs to happen going forward before the next election is Labour need to build both affordable and social housing. And it's going to be difficult because at the moment it's not so much an issue of building houses. The problem is the developers who are sitting on the land. They need to be forced to build properties. So this was highlighted before in the media. We tend to focus on the problem being not enough houses being built, and that is true. But we tend to also focus on the idea that, if you change the planning rules, then you'll be able to build more houses. The planning rules are not really the problem. The problem is developers. So what developers have been doing is buying land, getting planning permission, and then selling the land off for a profit. And there's no risk involved. You spend a bit of money for the planning permission, and then the value of the land is much more. So you're able to make a massive profit by basically doing nothing. And you sell it to another developer, and they maybe change something and they try to sell it on, or you just sit on it and hope that when it's eventually developed, you can sell it to another developer for more money, or sell it to somebody for more money. So they're sitting on the land, refusing to develop it. in order just to make a safe bit of cash, extra cash. Now that has to change. The government can deal with that without spending money. They can just change the law. They can say, look, you can hold on to this land, but if you don't develop it, I don't know, it has to be sold to the council, or the council can take it or something. Something has to. You either have to sell it or you have to develop it within a time frame. And if you don't, then you lose the planning permission, and then you're back to square one. So you lose the value of the land, or a significant value of the land. So there needs to be pressure on the developers. Now, when it comes to the building, there's also another problem. Brexit, the ending of freedom of movement. So there's a shortage of workers, there's a shortage of electricians, a shortage of plumbers, bricklayers, site managers, engineers. There's a shortage of pretty much everyone you need to build a house, to build a significant number of houses. There's also the problem of materials. You need to import a lot of materials. This is also more expensive because of Brexit. So it's more expensive to build properties at the moment, unless you're building them in a different way. And I'm not sure how the Labour government are going to get around that. You can put pressure on councils to build more houses, but if councils don't have the money, they're not going to be able to build more housing. So you're going to either have to change the rules for councils to be able to raise more finance, or you're going to have to give councils more money to build social and affordable housing. That's what should be happening in this parliament. But in order to achieve that, you need money. And Rachel Reeves has said, there is no money. so they're saying, well, there will be money when we have growth. But I keep saying, and I think she has the cart before the horse here, because she's saying, what we'll do is we'll grow the economy, and then we'll have loads of money, and then we're going to invest this in public services. But if you don't invest in public services, you're not going to see growth. If you don't invest in infrastructure, you're not going to see growth. Like, a business says, okay, we would like to expand, but there isn't the infrastructure in the area. We can't get the workers we need. We're not going to expand. So we're not going to help the economy grow. It's not by choice, it's just the reality of the situation. So if you want to grow the economy, you have to pump huge amounts of money into it. But Rachel Reeves has said that they're not going to raise any more taxes, or not really, and they're not going to increase borrowing. So how are you supposed to grow the economy? Like, you can talk about efficiencies, you can talk about the non-dom tax status, but that's bringing in maybe 2 or 3 billion pounds. It's nothing. It's probably how much the NHS spends in a week. You're not going to bring in enough money from that to rebuild the economy. And some of that money is, of course, being allocated to hiring teachers or improving schools or a whole range of other things. So I don't see how they're going to do that. Peter, thank you so much for that super chat. Time limit on planning permissions. Yes, there is something like that here in Italy, where you get planning permission, and it has a limit on how long. Now, I think generally planning permission does have a limit, but it could be something like 10, 15 years. So that has to be changed. And that's something that either the council can do or central government can do. There's no cost there. It's just you change it with the stroke of a pen. I'm not an expert on these things, so I don't know how difficult it is. Maybe you need to change rules within the council. The council have to vote on it, stuff like that. But there can be a bit of carrot and stick. The central government can say, look, if you change these rules, we're going to give you some extra money. Or if you change these rules, we're going to give you more powers to raise finance. So there will be an incentive for councils to push through measures that would, for example, put limits on planning permission. David, thank you so much for that comment. It says land banking is a big problem. Yes, so you have people buying up lots of land and just sitting on it. Most businesses in Japan still use fax machines. What? Japan is meant to be so far advanced, or maybe that's South Korea. Cart before the horse, topsy-turvy. Some others may say idiocy. Yes. Rachel looks so tense. I think she is making a few mistakes, to put it mildly. I think she's painted herself into a corner. I don't know what she's hoping to achieve by appearing tough with public finances. Look, if you want to grow the economy, you need to pump money into it. During a difficult time, you need to pump money into the economy. Austerity is not the way. We've seen the consequences of austerity. The sick man of Europe. Britain is now being called the sick man of Europe. So if you want to grow the economy, you have to pump money into it. Invest in infrastructure, public services. This will help grow the economy. You can't rely on business. And even if you could just rely on businesses, there are too many barriers. Barriers to accessing the workers' need and barriers to trade. I like Phil Millhouse's idea to replace council tax with a land tax, having the higher tax for unused land of potential use and not tax for farmland and residential owned property. Yes, there's so much land that's not being used. If it was taxed, it would then be used. Why doesn't Labour tax rich people more? That's a very good question, Conservative. Why don't they tax rich people? We'll have to wait for the budget, but it looks like that they're not going to tax rich people more because, well, some rich people donate to the Labour Party. So you're not going to tax people who donate to your party, are you? Labour in the pockets of rich beaches. Starmer is a land banker, literally. He has apparently got about £10 million in pockets of land. Because they will turn the lights off. A land value tax is zero dead weight loss tax, which covers 70% of wealth in the UK with a lot of positive extremities. Because they're red Tories. Labour has become the centre-right party, while the Tories have become the far-right party. It's that simple. The days of centre-left, centre-right died a long time ago. Yeah, you have a centre-right party, the Conservatives are a far-right party, and then Reform UK are beyond the pale. Larry the Cat says, can't be taxing the people who buy your suits. You know, it would bring in a huge amount of revenue. For example, things like synchronizing capital gains with income tax. Like, what is the justification for not having capital gains at the same rate as income tax? I've yet to hear anyone say, no, we shouldn't have it this way, and here's why. And this is once again a question that should be put to ministers, especially Rachel Reeves. Why don't you? This is something that wouldn't cost you anything. You make capital gains the same rate as income tax. And it would be fair because people who are paying income tax are paying it on their income. They're going out, they're working. In some cases, their fingers to the bone, and they're paying income tax. While there are others who are making huge amounts of money by literally doing nothing in some cases. They're making huge amounts of money through capital gains. Because things are increasing in value, and they're paying a lower rate. It should actually be a higher rate if you want to talk about rates of tax, but at least have them at parity. But capital gains is lower. That's why Rishi Sunak pays a lower rate of tax than his cleaners. I don't know how many dozen he has, but his staff, his servants pay a higher rate of tax than Rishi Sunak does because most of Rishi Sunak's money is through stocks and shares. I think he's still an MP. He's like an MP from the 19th century, doing it as a hobby. They won't vote for it, Max, because they would be asking the rich. You'd be asking the rich. The country needs to return to socialism after the last 14 years, but it's not going to happen. It's fucking depressing. Socialism is what's necessary. Higher taxes to fund public services. The right wing will call it communism, but it's socialism. It's funding higher taxes to fund public services. a social safety net for people who can't work or are in a situation between jobs. People who are carers need to be protected more. And the richest in society pay their fair share. There are people who have so much money that if they were to they wouldn't be able to spend it in their lifetime. If they tried to spend, if they went and bought Ferraris every day, they still wouldn't be able to spend all the money that they have. These people should be hit with a higher rate of tax and more taxes. So have more bans, increase the number of bans so that you're able to bring in more. That's because I don't know who it was that said it, but to become a billionaire, somebody else has to suffer. So the Jeff Bezos of this world, he is so rich because somebody else is struggling. It's not the case of, he's doing really well because he's really clever or he's been working really hard. In order to become a billionaire, a lot of people have to struggle. A lot of people have to suffer, and that's unfair. So guys, we're almost at the end of the stream, so I want to say thank you so much to everyone who came on tonight. I'm going to post in the community page after to get your feedback on this new format, whether you like it or not, or whether you'd like me to go back to the other format. I think it's slightly better. Maybe it's not so good. Maybe just a few shorter stories, just a few stories instead of going all over the place. I still go a little bit all over the place, but anyway, before we finish, I want to say thank you so much to everyone who came on. Thank you to everyone who sent a super chat, and thanks to the moderators for doing a wonderful job as always. I'll see you on a Friday, same bad time, same bad channel. So once again, I'll post something in the community page to get your feedback on this new format. And I'm going to try out another few things with the channel, see how these things work, and I'll see you on Friday. But before we go, of course, we have our one for the road. Hope you enjoy this.
This is an appeal on behalf of British MPs. Loyal, dependable, and above all, trustworthy. Our MPs are the very best of us, but some are in real need. Unable to survive on a standard MP salary of just £81,932, many have had to take on second jobs to make ends meet. This is David. He has no choice but to do a grueling half an hour a week for JCB, for which David is paid the paltry sum of £60,000 a year. She just wants to earn enough as an MP, but Fiona is also forced to work a second job as a consultant, sometimes earning just £11,487 an hour to top up her salary. And this is Andrew. This poor soul has taken on no fewer than 9 part-time jobs to scrape together the extra £158,548 a year he needs to feed his family. Sadly, his children won't get free school meals this Christmas because of circumstances beyond his control. And because of unfair means testing, none of these MPs qualify for universal credit. A £3,000 pay rise may go some way to easing the burden, but that may not happen. This can't go on, but you can help. Donate as little as £100,000 today, and you'll receive this fountain pen and a multi-million-pound PPE contract as a welcome gift. On behalf of David, Fiona, Andrew, and MPs like them, thank you.
Well said, Larry and Paul. So guys, have a great week. I'll see you on Friday, same bad time, same bad channel. Take care. Have a good evening and good night.